Hi, and welcome to Learn with Sawgrass, the Tuesday edition. I'm Rhonda, the Education Manager here at Sawgrass, and we're so glad to have you with us, whether it's live or whether you're going to watch this recording later. Rhodes is with me today, and he is in the chat. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, that's the place for you. Just go ahead and ask him. He'll bring anything up with me, or he'll answer you directly. So thank you again so much for joining us. We will be back tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. So we do this every week at 3 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, and then 10 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday mornings. So make sure you join us. Well, I guess I should tell you what we're doing today first. This week is what I'm calling back to the basics. So today we're going to talk about the basics of sublimation. What you need, well, the bare minimum of what you need for sublimation, and then we're going to talk about some of those other things you can get that make life a lot easier. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the basics of doing VersaFlex. So we will be doing some pressing tomorrow. Today, no pressing, but I do have all my presses with me so we can talk about them. Next week is going to be really exciting, so make sure to tune in. We're going to be talking about designing. Now, not specifically designing in our program. We're going to talk about designing in general. First of all, designing for the product you're pressing onto, and second, designing a collection. So pieces that work together so that you can sell more things or give away more things depending on what you do. And then also next week we have another podcast dropping. Remember, that is Inked Differently. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music as well. And that's going to be all about some design, or all about designing, and you're going to get some great tips from our creative marketing director, Lindsay Sport. And so that'll be next Friday. I'm really excited about that. But let's start today with the basics. And you know, I spent last week with the Minuteman Press franchise owners. A lot of the Minuteman Press facilities do have Sawgrass and sublimation equipment. And a lot of the questions I got asked were those basic things. So I kind of want to run through some of those today. So let's talk about the bare minimum of what you need to start sublimation. So first of all, you need a Sawgrass printer. So we do, of course, have two models. We do have the SG500 and the SG1000. The SG500 is going to be the smaller one. This is the larger one. But the 500 is a desktop printer that goes up to 8.5 by 14 out of the main tray. And that's the North American version. Our European version would go up to A4 paper in the main tray. This printer is a little different. You can do this on either your 1000 or your 500, but you are seeing that I have an option tray. It is an additional tray underneath. Makes my printer sit up a little bit higher, but it allows me to have two different paper sizes at once. So whether that is letter and legal, or whether that is letter and, I call it envelope, but mug paper, you can do that. Or of course you can have two different types of paper. Really handy if you're running the VersaFlex system. You know, when I think about the SG500, I would say the sweet spot is drinkware. Almost all of your drinkware, even if you're going completely wrapping around a tumbler, you still are pretty much going to fit on an 8.5 by 14, so, or 8.5 by 11. So drinkware is definitely a good thing for this. Also, those smaller items, keychains, magnets, coasters, all of those work great with the SG500. Now, this is the SG1000. It does go up to 11 by 17 in the main tray. In the European version of the printer, that is going to be A3 paper. You can also get a bypass tray. You can get one for both. But for the 1000, that's really great because it does go up to that 13 by 19, or in Europe, that would be A3 plus sized paper. Now you can get a bypass tray on the 500. I did leave that out, so I apologize. With that bypass tray, You can go 8.5 still, but you can go longer. So very handy if you're doing socks, if you're doing ties, and if you're doing cheerleader bows. So those longer things do work great out of that. Now, with that 13 by 19, of course, that's going to be tote bags, that's going to be pillows, that's going to be shirts too, so larger designs. If I were doing predominantly apparel or those home decor items, I would love 1,000 because that's really going to be the sweet spot for that. But again, with our software, you can do multi-up, so even if you're doing those smaller things, like the coasters and the can huggers and the magnets and the keychains, those work really great too because you can put multiples on a page. So that's a little bit about the printers. So if you're going to start sublimating, you do have to have a printer. I always say keep in mind what you want to do predominantly, because that's where you're going to start. So if I were to say I'm going to do mugs, I would probably get an SG 500, and then I suggest a tumbler press. So this is a tumbler press. This in front of me is what I'm going to call an automatic mug press. So let me talk about the difference. So the great thing about this is if I were just doing mugs, you were dropping it in, it's sensing and closing around it, and then it's going to pretty much set your time and temperature. You can like adjust it to say, I want to do the highest possible temperature, I want to do the highest possible time, but pretty much it's judging. So it's just a quick button to open and close, and that's really it. It does all the work for you. I suggest a tumbler press. And the reason I suggest a tumbler press is because it is adjustable, so you can do more things. You can do both your ceramic mugs here, but you also can do tumblers and water bottles out of here, typically the stainless steel ones, but does give you a lot of variety. A lot of these will come with multiple attachments. There are the shorter ones specifically for mugs. There's also a small one that you can do shot glasses with. So this is a very good press to have if you're going to start with drinkware. Now when we talk about flat presses, there are going to be several different models out there. I typically do not recommend just having the press that you hold and drop down because those are great for working with vinyl, but it's a little hard to get the pressure and the temperature that you need for sublimation. So I'm not going to show those today. Those typically aren't where I would go. What I would recommend is going to be a traditional flat press. So this is what we're going to call a swing away press. Quite obviously, it swings away. There's also a clamshell press. Clamshell presses tend to be a little more narrow in the back and then kind of angle up, and you just drop that down. I do love a good swing away. I know for the purposes of space, that clamshell comes in very handy because you don't need the extra room to swing away, and you really just have the width of the press and up. So that's what you need. You're going to need a press, and then you can get started. Now, I didn't talk about the other guy. I'll talk about him when I get back. But I do want to talk about the other things you absolutely have to have for sublimation. So the first is going to be gloves. There are many different styles of gloves. I get made fun of for these particular gloves. I've been told that I look like I have Mickey Mouse hands. But I do love them. I feel that they give me the protection I need. I can move in them, but there are heat gloves that fit more closely to your hand that still do a great job. Actually used a set last week in Vegas. So there are a lot of different gloves, but they are a must. Do not, I will pick up a mug because the handle is not hot, but pretty much other than that, anytime I am sublimating, these are on my hands. You'll see them when I'm doing fabric items. I may not use them quite as much because they typically lose the heat a little quicker, but they are very important. The next thing you're going to need is good quality heat tape. Now, I love a good heat tape dispenser. They're great. They make life easier. You just turn and it cuts the tape for you. So you're literally just picking up that tape to use it. Really good. Don't have to have a lot of hand space to do that. So good heat tape, very important. If you are getting lines, and when I say lines, lines are the exact shape of the tape on your item, heat tape may be the issue. So you do want to check that. Now, the other thing that you're going to see is there is some sort of protective paper. Blowout paper is what it's going to be called often. You can also just use parchment paper or wax paper. I know some people use a Teflon sheet, but what this does is it protects the press. I also like it because when you press, it's always item paper, and then this goes on top. And I think it gives a little protection from the material to the press too. So any of this works. I have a small sheet here. I have a big sheet here too. So you definitely want protective paper. So the basics to get started with sublimation: you need the printer, you need the press, you need the tape, and your gloves. And then you need that protective paper to go on top. Now, with this, if you have something that the design is bigger than the product, you're going to want to put this on the bottom too. So a sheet on the bottom and a sheet on the top, just so nothing is getting on that press, because it's hard to get sublimation ink out of the press. So that's the basics, but there is one other thing that you definitely have to have, and that's going to be our software. But before we talk about that, let's talk about this final press. This is a hat press. There are some other hat presses out there. They're a little bit smaller. There's one that Cricut makes that I've seen people use, where it's kind of a form that the hat sits on, and then you just again hold that down. This one allows you full pressure on the hat, allows you to put the hat brim inside. I don't know if I can open this from the back, but the hat goes right here. There is a little piece that helps pulls it tight. I will talk about this again tomorrow when we talk about VersaFlex. I've actually started doing bucket hats because the real thing is the interior dimension, and it's pulling it down enough. You can use this bucket hats as well as trucker hats, regular build hats. Any of that will work with this press. So really where you start is really going to be dependent on what you're going to do. So when you need to sublimate, you need a Sawgrass printer. You need a press for whatever you're going to be pressing. And then you're going to need your gloves and your tape and your blowout paper. But beyond that, you need the Sawgrass software. So let's take a quick look. I am on the Sawgrass website. When you do get started and you need to download the print utility, you can do that right from our website under software. You also, this is where you download the print utility, install it. You also are going to sign up for an account on our website. I'm going to go on over to my Sawgrass. I have always said, and will continue to say, that you do not have to use our design tool. It sits there for two groups of people. First, if you have nowhere else to design, it is a fantastic basic design tool for you to use. And then also it has the template. So if you want to make sure that your design is the correct size and shape for what you're pressing onto, that's another reason why I'd use our design tool. But before I jump too far in, Rhodes, do we have any questions or comments so far?
No questions right now, but Lori and Maggie both say hello.
Hello to Lori and Maggie. Didn't get to talk to you much last week, so glad to be back. So when we go into the tool, as you will see, we do have all of those products. We do have them broken out by category. So you can go in and you can pull that up. Like I said, it allows you to do the size and shape that works for the product that you're pressing onto. We do have two different ways to design in the program. One is going to be that you can go in and use our pre-made designs. We do add new content all of the time. We have some exciting things coming in soon. But you can go in. Normally our designs are going to have a background. They're going to have a design. And then they're going to have some text on it as well. So I can go in and I can fill with this. Now, I do have some exciting news. This is brand new news. So you get to be the first to hear it. We did an update to the design tool earlier today. And when we did that update to the design tool, you are going to see some speed improvement. Specifically in that gallery area that's been a little slower than we would want, you are going to see some really big swings at that. Now, I do suggest you clear your cache before you do that, but you should see that it's going to learn and get a little bit faster, which is really, really cool. All right, now you also can design pretty much from scratch. You can add our backgrounds or create your own. We do have shapes as well. And then we do have those images. You can also upload your own images into the program and add your text. So great way to design. If that's really not something that you have handy, you can design in our tool. And then of course you can go ahead and send that over to the print utility. So that is going to go ahead and pull up, and we're going to go to the print utility. I'm not really going to use this file, so I will use something else, but we'll go ahead and hit print just to send it over. And then I'm just going to jump into the print utility and use another file. Do have a lot of files going on, so we'll close some of these. Alright, so I'm actually going to use this one, and we're going to make this just a little bit smaller for my example. So I was saying that not everyone has to use, I moved my file and that's causing me a problem, so we'll just go ahead and grab a new one. I was saying earlier that you don't have to use the design tool, but we do definitely recommend that everyone use the print utility because you are going to get those files that you need. Hold on for me while I grab something. Let's go ahead and grab a file.
While you're looking through for your files, Melissa asked, can you make a cut line with the design tool?
A cut line with the design tool, so for using that with, say, Cricut or Silhouette, no, you would need to design specifically in their software. So if you are cutting, your best bet is going to be to use their software. Yay. Okay, cool. All right, so I do have my image. I have a cat on here. I actually think I have 2 cats because I had them broken apart. And that file's not going to be the best for today. So this is what I get for focusing on everything else. So give me one moment. There we are. Okay, cool. I have recently cleaned my computer and moved things around. Alright, so here is my file. Let's say this was a magnet that I was going to do. The most important thing you're going to do here in the program, let me switch my printer. So the most important thing you're going to do here is set what you're pressing onto. Now we do have the presets. This does make life a lot easier. So if I were doing this as a metal keychain or even a metal magnet, that would work and it would do all of my settings for me. So I wouldn't have to touch anything in this area. It's going to do the work for me. The only thing I may change is whether it's portrait or landscape, and whether it is centered on the page or not. But otherwise, it's going to do my settings. I just come in, if I'm doing a different paper size or the different paper type would be pretty much the only thing I would need to change. Now you can do all of this on your own. You don't have to use the presets, but they are there to help. And then of course, if I wanted to put multiples, if I were doing more than one of these keychains, I could come in and do that. And then I can space them out so that they're not too close together. Makes it a little bit easier. I will often take my page, and then I'm going to actually center this so you can see what I'm talking about. But what I'll often do is take my page and then put the magnet or whatever down on the paper and tape it instead of cutting them all out. Now, I know my friend Lori's on here. I know she does the opposite. She likes to cut them out. But it really depends on what works best for you. I typically keep it as a sheet, just increase that spacing in between them. The other thing that the print utility is going to allow you to do is it is going to allow you to choose the color mode. Now we do have photographic and we do have vivid. Photographic's very accurate to what the colors look like. Vivid's going to be a little brighter and a lot more saturated to give you a bolder color. Now you will see classic mode if you were using our previous print utility and you prefer that as far as the color output. You can use that classic mode to help you get closer to what you're used to. And then of course you can do custom. This is going to allow you to go in and create basically your own color profile by adjusting the hue and the saturation and the brightness and all of those things to make that look exactly the way you want to. All right, so that's it. That's the basics of sublimation. For sublimation, you are going to need a Sawgrass printer. You are going to need a press for whatever you're going to be pressing onto. You're going to need the blowout paper. Again, that can be parchment or wax paper. And then also you're going to need the tape and you're going to need the gloves. And that's the basics of sublimation. So that's what you need to get started. And of course, a pair of scissors. I think you've seen me before forget my scissors. But that plus your software that Sawgrass provides at no charge is what you're going to need to successfully start with sublimation. Now, not everything you do is a simple mug or a simple metal keychain. There are going to be things a little bit more difficult. So I asked Rhodes to stump me. So he's got some items he pulled out of our product room, and we're going to talk about how you would sublimate them, just to get you a little started on some of the other things that you may include or may want to have to make life a little bit easier. So before we jump over, Rhodes, do we have any other questions?
No questions right now.
Awesome. All right, let me grab my big box of fun stuff. Oh, and I did not mention one press. And I have a feeling I'm probably going to be talking about it, but that's convection oven. So most of our dealers are going to carry some kind of convection oven. A lot of people will just pick up a convection oven. Don't cook in it and sublimate in it. Just use it for sublimation. But convection ovens are good for those weird sized or odd sized products. So let me grab a box. Okay, let's see what we've got. My desk is a little full today. All right, aha, first one. So this is a wine tumbler. One of the big things about the wine tumblers, and they came out a few years ago, but one of the things that make them difficult is they're not flat. So because they're not flat in here, and then you may want to design further down, because of this shape, it's really hard to get an even pressure. So one of the things about sublimation that you need to know is that you do need consistent and complete pressure. I had this issue last week. I was making ceramic mugs. I was kind of in a hurry the way I was doing it, and I wasn't always getting it lined up perfectly on either side of the handle. And because of that, I would often get ghosting on one side. So if you ever see what looks like the ink has tried to escape, and either that's going to be just fuzziness or it may be that it's actually streaking out, that's going to be what we call ghosting. And basically what that means is that the ink did not go straight in a line. So let me show you something. So just as a refresher, when we do sublimation, what sublimation literally means is that a solid becomes a gas without having to become a liquid first. So it's basically skipping a state. So you have ink on a paper. You do use, oh my gosh, I left one out. There's one more thing that you have to have for sublimation, and that's sublimation paper. So sublimation paper is going to be required, and the reason is because the ink stays on top. That paper is specially coated so that the ink does not absorb into the paper and it sits on top. Now, I hear it all the time. I'm going to sublimate with copy paper. Can I sublimate with copy paper? And the answer is no. I mean, could you? Yes. Are you going to get the best result? No. And that's because some of that ink is going to absorb into the paper. With sublimation transfer paper, it is going to stay on top, so you don't have to worry about that. So your ink is on top. When it's heated, anywhere above 311 degrees, it is going to become a gas. Now, how hot you're going to have your press is going to be dependent on what you're pressing onto. Most sublimation items are going to be about 400 degrees. It may be less than that. I've seen a couple that are more, but most are going to be around that 380 to 400 range. All sublimation products have a poly coating. That poly coating, the pores open when it is heated. So under pressure, your ink is going to become a gas and it is going to travel into those pores. Now, pressure is going to be very important, consistent pressure, but also the tape. The tape is going to hold it down and make it so that it is going straight ahead. So my design is going to go into the pores directly in front of it, and you get a beautiful product like this. Now, when the heat is removed, the ink becomes a part of the coating, and that's why sublimation is so special. Colors are very bright, your colors are very vibrant, and they are now a part of the coating forever. The only way this leaves is if the coating breaks down for some reason. So in this case, this tumbler is not supposed to be dishwashed. If you did dishwash it, you may have some damage. But for mugs, dishwash them all the time and they're perfectly fine. But you want to be careful, make sure you're following the product recommendations. But this is what you should be getting. Now, that's why these are so difficult, because you cannot get that even pressure, because as you see, there's a little bit of a slant down on this. Now, what you're going to do, of course, you always are going to remove any accessories. So I remove my lid, and then I am going to put this in a convection oven. But before I do, you heard that word pressure. So this is where you use shrink wrap. So you can get shrink wrap sleeves. You are going to heat that up, and that is going to shrink wrap around it. So you put your design on, tape it down good, put the shrink wrap on, heat that so it kind of condenses down, and then we're going to put this in the convection oven. Now I know some people do not shrink it before they put it in the convection oven. They let the shrink wrap do it, or let the heat of the convection oven shrink the shrink wrap. Either way works, whatever works and gives you the best results. But you can do these kind of things in that convection oven. They do sit in there a little bit longer. You are probably, instead of, I usually do my tumblers at about 90 seconds, and I know a lot of people say that's too long. But I'll usually do a minute and a half to a minute 45, rotating it to get that full wrap or full wrap design. But with this is probably going to be higher than 6 minutes, probably in the 6 to 9 minute range in the convection oven. But can't stump me with this one, Rhodes. This just goes in a convection oven.
Lori has a good comment here in the chat. She says, make sure to sublimation shrink wrap. I've seen so many people try and use packaging shrink wrap that ends in a mess.
That would, yeah, make sure you're using sublimation shrink wrap. Very good point that I don't even think about, so thank you. All right, so this is kind of a cool mug. It is one that does have color on the inside. I was telling someone last week, they were saying, so you can't sublimate onto a black mug. There are mugs out there that actually have a black border and then black here and then just a white panel to go into. The big thing with those, and even with these, is you want a design that's really going to work with this. So if you want to hear more about designs that work great with your product, check me out next Tuesday at the same time and we'll discuss that. But this is really great. This one's not too difficult. Really the big thing is how you design onto this. If I were to do a design that was fully black and put this on here, my bottom's still going to be white, so how does that look? Would that work? That's going to be something to kind of consider how we design, and of course right here would stay white as well. So I would probably do something that didn't completely fill it, but I would do something that worked really well with the black that's inside, so really like that product. Oh, game mat. So this is neoprene. I don't want to open this, but it is pretty big. So again, a lot of it's going to come down to how you design for this. You could do paper that would completely cover it. You probably wouldn't though. It is, just so you know what I'm seeing, it's 31.5 inches long. So I would probably design something that would go, maybe even design something that would go in pieces. If you saw me a few weeks ago, I did that with a table runner. So I may do something that fits in different pieces. One of the questions we get asked is, like if I were to sublimate on the left side and then I were to sublimate another panel, can I put the piece that's already done under the press? Would that hurt it? No, it won't hurt it. You always are going to cover it with paper so that if there were any ink that may gas off of that or fade off of that, it's going onto the paper and not your press. But otherwise, I know that this kind of thing is usually pretty close to 400 degrees for a minute. This actually says a little lower, about 374. I'd still probably go a little closer to 400. And it is neoprene. Neoprene, first of all, smells awful when you press onto it, so make sure you're in a well-ventilated room. And then second of all, never, ever, ever reverse it. So never put the design underneath the material because it is so thick that the heat can't get through the rubber. So you want to make sure that the design is on top when you're doing this kind of material. All right. Okay, we'll do this one next. So this is a puzzle. I love puzzles, but I will tell you, you can see it here in the packaging. It's already kind of a little like coming apart because that's what puzzles are supposed to do. So my tip for puzzles is I do put tape on the back. So I always put a little bit of tape on the back just to hold it. So I'm not worried about that in the pressing process. You could always put it down on the press, put your paper on top as well, but you know, I'm a big about flipping it over. So I usually put some tape on the back just to make sure, again, that even surface is so important for sublimation, to make sure everything's getting an even pressure. So that's kind of what I do. I will say this, if you are with us live and you do have any stumpers for me, please give them to Rhodes. Let's see what he asked me, but we can always do those too. All right, the last item in here is a slate. Slates are great. They are wonderful, but as you can see, slate is not even around the edge. So you have to be very careful with slate to make sure that it's getting into that. So I never do slate without a pad. So let me show you what that looks like. So I have 3 different pads here, and we're going to talk about the uses. So often, this is my friend. It came with us from the old building, if you remember that we have an old building. I love this particular silicone pad because it is so flexible. This is what I use anytime where the issue to me is I want to make sure that I'm completing it, that I'm making it flat, because it does get into those edges really well. So I use this pad with slate. I also use this pad with glass and acrylic just to make sure I'm getting a really good even surface. So this is probably my favorite of our pads that I use. Again, it's a must for slate. I use it with glass and acrylic too.
We do have a comment here from Joel in the chat. He says it's a good idea to talk about the green result and faded color result.
Yep, I'll talk about that. All right, so this pad I use more just to kind of cushion things. So I'll often use this with like a ceramic or ceramic tile or a ceramic coaster, just to kind of cushion it and make sure that it doesn't break. I'll often use this. Now you will often hear me refer to a pressing pillow. Do have multiple sizes of these. This is good for anything that isn't even fabric wise. So I use this in pillowcases, I use this in tote bags, anything with a seam, anything like that, I would use this. Now, if I were doing like denim, and we are going to do later this month, we're going to do upcycling with some clothes and Versaflex, I'd probably use this just to make it a little easier for the if I have to get really close to like where the zipper is or the buttons are. I may use this just to give it a little more cushion, but I really love these. Now, one of the questions that came up last week that I think is important to talk about is polyester. When you are pressing on polyester, you often get a line. It's kind of around the edge of where the item is. You're going to get a line. Now, there are two schools, well, there's a lot of schools of thought, but my 2 favorite schools of thought is, one is you rip the edges, and by ripping the edges of the paper, it's no longer that harsh line. The other is using a pressing pillow. So the general rule of thumb is your design is the smallest thing, your pressing pillow is the next smallest thing, and then your paper is the largest. So if it goes image and then pressing pillow and then paper, usually that will help prevent that line as 2. So those are probably the biggest. Now, Joel said fading.
He said the green result and then a faded color result.
Yeah, so often a faded result is going to be that there is not enough pressure. So that's going to be a pressure result. The other is there's a general rule of thumb that if your blacks are greenish, that's going to mean that the temperature was not high enough or the time was not high enough, it didn't fully cook. And then if your blacks are more on the brown side, well, that's overbaked. So that means that you need to dial down your time or dial down your temperature. And we're going to talk about this again tomorrow when we talk about VersaFlex. It is kind of like a recipe. It's a balancing act between your pressure, your time, and your temperature. Same thing can be said for sublimation. Generally, if your results don't seem to be as vibrant as you'd want, it's not getting enough time in it or heat, and it's not getting enough heat for long enough, or it's not getting enough heat for the long enough period of time, or it's not at a high enough pressure to really make that design pop. So you can kind of play around with those. And I completely forgot what I wanted to make sure and tell you today. If you have not realized it yet, we have added something to the print utility that I really adore. So let me show you that real fast. I will be very honest with you and tell you when something is added to the software because of me. So this was not me, but I wish it was because I really love it. And that is now after the release last Thursday. If you click on this little arrow, you can see the recommended press settings for the item that you're pressing onto. So whatever you select on the left side is going to be reflected on that preview. Now you will see the note here. I will tell you this all the time. These are just general recommendations. To truly know for the product you were using, check your dealer's website, check their recommendations. If they differ from ours, always go with theirs. But if you don't have that, if you didn't get it from a site that has that information, or you got it from my big room of stuff and you don't know, you can go on your general setting recommendations here. But it's very handy to have it. And I don't know who gets the credit for that one, but definitely credit for our team for adding that in. All right. That's all my items in my mystery box. Did anyone else have a stumper for me?
No other stumpers or anything in here.
All right. Okay, no questions, no comments.
No, we are caught up on everything.
Awesome. Well, I hope this helped. It was a lot of information in a very short amount of time, but hopefully this kind of gave you some of those basics of sublimation to help you get started, or maybe to try something new, because slate coasters are wonderful. We are reaching the holidays. They make a great gift. So hopefully you got some inspiration today. Join us tomorrow morning. We are going to talk specifically about VersaFlex and some of those tips and tricks for being successful with VersaFlex. Spent a whole week making t-shirts last week along with my mugs. So I've got some new things there too. So join us tomorrow for that. And like I said, next week's going to be really exciting because we're going to be talking about some design tips. So that's it for today. We'll see you again tomorrow, and I hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.